apart from her in 25 years for this long.
To the untrained eye, it's easy to fall for the soft voice and the tired face of a so-called grieving husband whose wife has been missing for 18 days. Easy to believe him, easy to move on. But not everyone watched and believed. And now, an expert who has spent more than 20 years reading the people no one else could read has taken those same interviews apart and caught something most people missed sitting right there in plain sight. For the thousands of people who have been following this case from the day Lynette Hooker vanished off that dinghy, something never sat right. It was not one thing, it was many things. The calmness in Bryan's voice on the recorded phone call, the timeline that didn't match the distance, the story that placed the ignition key in the hand of a woman who, by her own daughter's account, never drove the boat. Irritation turned to anger. Anger turned into open suspicion. But suspicion is not proof, and Bryan Hooker's attorney, Terrell Butler, made that exact point on every microphone that would carry her voice. Her client, she said, categorically and unequivocally denied any wrongdoing. She said he was cooperating. She said he was heartbroken. She said the police had shown him no evidence because there was no evidence to show.
He was questioned in relation to causing harm, which resulted in her death, but we have no evidence that, or at least we've not been informed of any evidence that any body has been recovered.
Bryan himself, in the interviews he gave after his release, kept to the same line. He had never harmed Lynette. He never would. He wanted to find her.
I said I've never harmed Lynette, and I never would harm Lynette, and I want to find Lynette.
And for a moment, it looked like that might hold. The Bahamian Department of Public Prosecutions recommended his release, pending further investigation. He walked out of Central Police Station in Freeport on the evening of April 13th. No charges, free to move, free to leave. And within days, he had done exactly that. Gone back to the United States, his attorney saying his mother was ill. But Bryan's own words have now caught up with him, and the person who caught them is not a police officer and not a prosecutor. She is a body language and deception analyst whose work has been trusted by federal judges, the FBI, and Homeland Security. She has consulted on some of the most high-profile cases of the last 2 decades. Casey Anthony, Jeffrey Epstein, Bryan Kohberger, Elizabeth Holmes. And when she sat down with the Bryan Hooker footage, it did not take her long. The moment that gave her everything she needed came inside one answer. The reporter asked Bryan what it had been like to be in police custody while the search for his wife went on without him. Bryan said it was hell. He said he was still in it.
My time with the Bahamian police was a small part of hell and a bigger part of hell that I'm really in right now.
And then, without being asked, he added something he did not need to say. I don't have a wife. 5 words. 5 ordinary words, spoken in a soft, tired voice. And for anyone half listening, they would sound like a man broken by loss. But to her, those 5 words were a window. A husband actively searching for his wife. A husband who minutes earlier in the same interview had said he still believed Lynette could be alive, that people had survived in the Bahamas for days, even weeks after going overboard. That husband does not speak of his wife in the past tense. He says he misses his wife. He says he's trying to find his wife. He does not say he doesn't have one. not before a body has been recovered, not before anyone has stopped looking. Bryan had already placed his wife in the past. He had already closed the door on her in the way he shaped his sentence. And whether he meant to or not, that one small line told the analyst something the attorney's statements could not cover up. Bryan Hooker was not talking like a husband who was still hoping. He was talking like a husband who already knew. Before we go any further into what the expert found, I just want to take a moment to thank you for being here, not only for supporting this channel, but for standing with the truth and for a woman who right now can't speak for herself. This channel exists to keep cases like Lynette's from being quietly forgotten. So if you believe she deserves answers, please consider liking this video, sharing it with someone who follows the case, and subscribing so every new development you hear it first. Do you think Bryan's slip was accidental, or did he let something real slip out? Drop your answer in the comments, I read them. Her name is Susan Constantine. For over 2 decades, she has analyzed the people other people can't read. She has trained federal court judges. She has worked with the Department of Defense. She is the author of How to Spot a Liar in 7 Seconds or Less, and her framework for identifying deception has been used in courtrooms across more than 30 states. When true crime interviewer Matt Johnson brought her the Bryan Hooker tapes, she did not guess. She ran him through her method. And before she ever got to that 5-word slip, she started where every good analyst starts, with the baseline. The baseline was the phone call Bryan made to his friend Blaine Stevenson days after Lynette vanished. Stevenson recorded it. CBS News later verified the audio. In that call, Bryan gave the longest account he has ever given of what happened on the water that night. It is the single recording every other interview can be measured against, and Susan Constantine measured it. She described Bryan's vocal delivery on that call as almost completely flat. No rise, no drop, no break in the voice of the kind a person tends to produce involuntarily when describing the loss of someone they love. Then she looked at the structure of the story itself. In truthful accounts, people tend to spend their time evenly. Some setup, the actual event, then the aftermath. Bryan's account was heavy on everything around the event. 3-foot waves, 20-mile-an-hour winds, the life jackets they normally wore, the flotation cushion he said he threw. But the moment itself, the moment his wife went into the water, was over in a single phrase. She bounced. Then Susan Constantine turned to the words he used. She flagged a handful of specific patterns. Minimizing words, basically just, kind of. Hedging phrases that leave a door open to changing the story later. A repeated default to the number 3, 3-foot waves, 3 of this, 3 of that, which her research ties to invention under pressure. On their own, she said, none of these things would mean much. But stacked together, inside one short account, they form what she calls a cluster. And clusters, in her framework, are what allow her to call something what it is. She called Bryan's account deception indicated. That was the baseline. But the real weight of her analysis came when she compared what she was seeing in Bryan to a name every true crime viewer already knows: Alex Murdaugh. Susan Constantine was direct about it. What she saw in Bryan's on-camera emotional moments, the moment he said he didn't think he had ever been apart from Lynette this long in 25 years, the moment his voice broke as if a tear was coming, was something she has analyzed before. In her terminology, it is called a performing cry. The features that come with real grief were not there. No tears, no dimpling in the chin, no lines forming between the eyebrows that real sadness pulls into place. Instead, she saw a stretched mouth, eyebrows raised as if trying to persuade, and emotion that switched on and off almost instantly. A real feeling, she explained, has a shape. It rises, it peaks, it falls naturally. Bryan's would spike, then be interrupted, usually by a cough. And this is where she stopped and made the comparison plain. Alex Murdaugh had done the exact same thing during his interviews, and later on the witness stand. He would begin to cry, then cough, then return to calm almost on command. To Susan Constantine, Bryan's pattern was not just similar to Murdaugh's, it was the same pattern wearing a different face. Once Susan Constantine had the baseline and the emotional pattern, everything else in the interviews started to read differently. The moments Bryan went out of his way to sound like a loving husband, which was nearly every moment he was allowed to speak freely, were the moments that gave her the most to work with. The first thing she caught was something the audience could see for themselves once it was pointed out. When Bryan said on camera that he loved his wife, that they had been together for almost half his life, that they belonged to each other, his head moved. Not dramatically, a small, subtle side-to-side shake. The kind of shake a person makes when they disagree with something. Except the words coming out of his mouth were a declaration of love. His words said yes, his head said no. Susan Constantine calls that a face and head anomaly, a signal where the body leaks the opposite of what the words are trying to sell. The body, she says, tells the truth when the mouth is working overtime. The second thing she caught was quieter but heavier. During one of Bryan's post-release interviews, a reporter asked Bryan whether the police had directly asked him if he had hurt his wife. Bryan answered that he had never harmed Lynette. That one-word swap, hurt to harm, is something Susan Constantine has seen many times before, particularly in domestic and abuse cases. It is called a category shift. A person who changes the verb is answering a different question than the one they were asked. Hurt is broad. It covers fights, pushes, grabs, slaps, threats. Harm is narrower, more legalistic, and, in the speaker's own mind, easier to deny. The interviewer asked about hurt. Bryan answered about harm. To her, that swap was not an accident, it was a choice.
What Susan Constantine saw on screen was a carefully projected image of a devoted husband. What Lynette's own family was describing was a marriage that had been, in her mother's words, full of highs but full of some very dark lows. The two pictures could not both be true, and Bryan was the only one selling the first one. As of today, no body has been recovered, no charges have been filed. The Royal Bahamas Police Commissioner, Shanta Knowles, confirmed that Bryan remains a suspect in the case, and his own attorney has acknowledged that under Bahamian law, he could still be rearrested as the investigation develops. The United States Coast Guard has its own criminal investigation running in parallel and has already interviewed Carly Aylesworth directly. But some of the hardest questions in this case are not the ones the police are asking. They are the ones ordinary people have asked from the start, and none of them have been answered yet. A bartender who served the couple the evening before, known only as Ken, went on record saying the 4-mile route Bryan claimed to have paddled for 8 to 10 hours should not take that long, even drifting. A telecom source told Fox News Digital that Bryan's cell service during that same stretch was spotty. The paddleboards that could have carried him faster were reportedly still strapped to the yacht.
And the question that started this video has still not been resolved. Bryan Hooker has said publicly and repeatedly that he believes Lynette could still be out there alive. But in the same breath, on camera, he told a reporter he did not have a wife. Those two sentences belong to two different men. One is still searching, the other has already given up. The expert who watched the footage believes only one of them is telling the truth. What is also still sitting on the table is the picture that Lynette's family drew of her final months. A woman who had left her husband more than once, a woman who was reportedly planning to leave him again, a woman whose daughter had publicly feared for her safety long before a single dinghy was launched. None of that is a conviction. None of that is a charge, but none of it has been disproven either. It is waiting there, and the people closest to Lynette are the ones still waiting with it. For now, this case lives in the space between what Bryan has said, what his body has shown, and what his family and law is refusing to let go of. A man walked free from a police station in Freeport, got on a plane, and went home. A woman is still somewhere out there, or somewhere she will never be found. And the words he said, on a camera, in a quiet voice, the words that admitted more than he meant to, are still hanging in the air, with no one yet able to explain why he said them. This story is nowhere near over. Bryan could be brought back in. New evidence could surface tomorrow. Carly is still pushing. The Coast Guard is still working. And when something breaks, you'll hear it here first, with the facts, not the noise. If this was the kind of coverage you want more of, hit subscribe so the next update lands in your feed. And drop a comment. Do you believe Bryan is telling the truth, or do you think Lynette's family is right? I'll see you on the next one.